The SVD is one of the best weapons since the armor hitbox changes, but it's also one of the most tricky to build. It's very easy to get it wrong and end up like this guy, stuck in the middle of urban combat and gunned down in the middle of the street. I think I dropped him. SVD Defender. Dragging his weapon back to the hideout, we'll be taking a look at it in more detail to see what could have been done differently. So everything that you know about modding kind of goes out of the window with the SVD because it's a very awkward gun with very specific requirements. You can't have ergonomics and recoil at the same time, and these two things kind of fight over each other. At the same time, even the minimum recoil version of the SVD isn't actually that low, it's 92, as we'll see in a bit. That said, it is semi-auto, so recoil matters a little bit less with the current recoil model that we have, and so using this information, we have to decide how to put together the best build that we can given these restrictions. First most important point that you should know about the SVD is that you cannot avoid overswing with the suppressor. I've talked about overswing a little bit on the channel recently, and this is the process where when you ADS down specifically through LPVOs, but it happens with other sites as well, you get this huge overswing effect where the gun overshoots over the top of where you're targeting and then resettles back onto the target itself. This happens when ergonomics and weight reach a certain particular threshold, and on the SVD, if you attach the threaded muzzle brake compensator and then the suppressor over the top, you cannot avoid overswing. There is nothing that you can do about this. You could put it in a stock configuration, you could put all the maximal ergo attachments on, it's just too heavy and it simply doesn't work. For this reason, you basically need to think about whether you want to go suppressed right away at the beginning of your build, because if you don't, it changes how you're going to create the whole gun. I've been playing a little bit recently with an unsuppressed version of the SVD. While you're playing with it, you need to keep in mind that you're very, very loud and you're also very distinctive. Most people will know what weapon it is and they will try to play around it. So you've got to then think, what are they going to do to then do what you're going to do as well. So it changes your gameplay style as well as just changing what you're going to mod. So back to the SVD itself. There are two branches with which to take this gun, which is one of the reasons why it's a bit strange, and they are quite low down the tree, so they're a base that you then build everything else off of. This one that we got from this player is the SAG Mark I, which is this one here, this particular chassis, and this combines with this custom cut dust cover to fit onto the weapon. The other way that you can build this weapon is using this thing here, which is the upper band. This is actually the way that the SVD starts off with this upper band, and so if you do want to change over to the Mark I, you have to remove this and add the SAG Mark I on instead. If you have the upper band on, you then use this dust cover instead because it's a lot longer, and then you have to either attach a rail or something else in order to equip any scopes. I'm not going to linger on these min recoil builds too much right for now. We will talk about them again in a bit, but this is the minimum recoil build for the upper band version. As you can see, I've got that down here, and we're going to ignore the fact that you could put a night vision scope over on one of these rails because that does technically decrease the recoil, but you can't really do anything with the gun if you do that. So 92 is the practical minimum for the upper band version, and over on the Mark I, you then have 98. So the difference really between the Mark I and the upper band is predominantly that the upper band version focuses mostly on recoil at the expense of a bit of ergonomics, whereas the Mark I is more ergocentric at the expense of a bit of recoil. The difference between these builds is usually about 6 recoil, so long as you're using equivalent parts. Right. Back to the original weapon that we picked up from our player. Now, the first thing that is actually problematic about the SVD is probably the optic. This is not normally a place that we start, but for the SVD, it makes a really big difference. Compare, for example, the Elcan against something like the Voodoo. This makes a much bigger impact than you would think because we've got overswing and the fact that it's a slow swing in the first place. It makes a large difference as to when you can actually see on the screen. With the Elcan, it takes 26 frames for the reticle to come onto the screen, whereas with the Voodoo, this only takes 17. This particular choice of scope, and I do understand that the LPVOs are expensive, but you could probably pick something like the TAC 30, anything like that that's got a nice wide field of view is better than the Elcan on the SVD, simply because of how quickly you can achieve your target. If you take a completely unmodded SVD and you put on a basic rail and you add an LPVO like a Voodoo on there, you can actually see the reticle in 20 frames, which is better than our modded SVD with the Elcan on it, which might be quite surprising, but it's true. Now, all of this assumes that you're using the SVD like a regular player in a sort of DMR type sense. There is a way to kind of avoid or bypass this requirement for the ADS speed because there's a way to do it quicker, but it does require you to play like a little bit of a maniac. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. This is more kind of for regular players who aren't just going to be running around like Shift W Chad. With this, obviously, you can kind of pick whatever you like. I'm, at this point, trying to choose the Guy's Elite rings because these give you 1 extra ergonomics. So I'm going to add the top to that. It's half on each. And then we're going to put the Voodoo in here. If you don't like the Voodoo's price, you can always try to get the Barter, which is a little bit cheaper, using the 2 GPXs. Or, as I said, pick something else that's a little bit more cost effective, like the TAC 30. It's not too bad usually, only about 50k right now, which I think is a pretty good steal. And some of the others usually are a bit cheaper too. The Voodoo and the Razor are normally the most expensive. A good middle ground sometimes is the Schmidt & Bender 1 to 8. If you can stand the extra long distance of the 8 times. Might be good on a map like Lighthouse. So from here, we've got 25.5 ergo and 104 recoil. What I find a little bit strange about this particular build is the stock usage. So the advanced tube isn't too bad. You can go for something different than this particular combination. You can go for something like the Viper PDW, but I don't think this really makes enough of a difference on the ergo to sacrifice all of that vertical recoil. I have tried this build a little bit, and I think that this one that we're about to make now is a bit better. All we're going to have to do here is change the PRS Gen 3, which is not very good on recoil to ergo, like bang for buck. We're going to change this over to the MOE. The MOE always used to be really, really decent. This is the MOE black I've got on here. It doesn't really matter which color you choose. And we're going to add the butt pad on the back. This gets us to 32.5 ergonomics and 106 vertical recoil. So now we're only losing 2 vertical recoil and gaining a lot of ergo, which is really good. I don't know why the DRG is on here. This must be some relic from a previous build. So we're going to remove that to give us 1 extra ergonomics. And we're also going to remove the front sight as well, just for a little bit of extra weight. This gets this gun into pretty good shape. We're using the 20 rounders, which, given you can't avoid overswing anyway, you probably should just be using. And then you've got the pistol grip. This goes on this new mount, the PSVD series, which is the Lynx Arms AK series pistol grip adapter. And onto that, we've got the AGS 74, which is the best grip you can get for the SVD. So that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And so with this combination of the SAG Mark 1 and the MOE with the butt pad, we have quite a nice balance of ergonomics versus vertical recoil. Rather than 17 frames of ADS, this one now achieves 14 instead, and it's lighter to boot, which means that you're going to get better arm stamina and your overall loadout is a little bit lighter than it would have been otherwise. So if you want to play standard suppressed SVD, this is pretty much what I would suggest. You could add a canted if you really wanted to, but there are some other ways of playing the SVD that we're going to talk about now. So we're going to switch back to the minimum recoil build. Now, if you want the lowest recoil possible, you probably do want to use one of the upper band builds. The first thing that's quite surprising about this is we've gone from a 14 frame ADS speed weapon, which we improved from a 17 ADS speed weapon, and this weapon shows the reticle in 20 frames. It's not actually that much longer, despite the fact that the ergo is literally 0. What matters for this, and where the difference really lies, is in terms of the size of the overswing. The size of the overswing for the minimum recoil build is huge. It's absolutely enormous. It's about twice the size of the weapon that we just built. But the important point to note about all of this is that the overswing length is about 50 frames. This is a very long time when we're talking 10 frames up to 20 frames in terms of the actual reticle appearing on the screen. But the amount of time that it takes the reticle to swing back from overswing, even though it's wider on a build with 0 ergo, it actually takes the same time to resettle. So the swing is more violent, which is obviously not as good, but it doesn't take any longer to resettle than it does on a build that only just gets a bit of overswing, which is quite interesting. The second part about this is that you probably do want to be using a canted of some kind if you're going to go with this strange build, the NC Star backup mount and maybe a delta point or something, which is what I'm using for demonstration purposes on this particular build. We don't really care about the extra ergonomic hip because it doesn't really matter. But what you can do with this gun is use the pretty well-known sprint to ADS technique, where you are moving very, very quickly, and just as you stop sprinting, you right click and you aim down the sight. And this avoids a lot of the blacking out of scopes or any of the weird overswing stuff. There is still some present. You do still have to deal with some overswing, but it's a lot faster and a lot cleaner than if you just do it from a standing start. This is a very weird quirk about Tarkov, and a lot of the Chad players know about this. It's one of the reasons why they shift W around all over the place. You have to be sprinting first to achieve this effect, which is a little bit odd and kind of counterintuitive. Given this build has 92 vertical recoil, I'll show you a difference between a build with a lot of recoil and a build with not that much. Again, as we said, because it's semi-auto, it doesn't necessarily make that much difference between the min recoil build and a sort of more regular build up in the 130s or something like that. But I will say it is more controllable, especially if you're spam firing. So if you're playing an aggressive CQB style of the SVD, you could use a build with 0 ergo like this or something very close to it that focuses on vertical recoil, because you're sprinting around and using the little ADS trick to get onto target faster and then use the low recoil to kill people with the enormous bullets that come out of the SVD, because this is a very, very scary gun. All right, so the final build that I want to show you is the loud version. Now, this is pretty much the build that we made before. This is the Voodoo, this is the MOE with the good pistol grip, 20-round mag, and using the SEG Mark 1 chassis. Now, the underpressed version of this is basically just taking off the threaded adapter with the suppressor, removing it, and that gets us up to 56.5 ergonomics and 121 vertical recoil. So the vertical recoil isn't necessarily that great, but you don't have any overswing on this weapon. This is a huge bonus because you're not dealing with that 50 frames worth of overswing while you're aiming at people. It's much cleaner, it's much crisper. And what you want to do with this gun is to be playing around the sounds that you make. When you fire, you then don't really want to be staying in the same position. You want to be moving and flanking, knowing that it's going to draw people in like flies. Lots of people are going to be looking in at your last known location. So use the sound that you hear. Try to leave scavs alive if you can to hear other players. You need to gather as much information as you can about the whereabouts of other people. Once you have the information about them, you can then use the fact that this thing only has 10 frames of ADS speed and no overswing to hopefully beat them in combat. Now, I did this relatively well recently with a absolutely massive flank to kill a duo, which I'll show you in a moment, but I definitely think that there are legs for the unsuppressed version of the SVD. If you don't want to spend all that money, you can actually build a very cheap version of the SVD that compares pretty well against the more modded version, because all you really need to do is put on some kind of rail, doesn't really matter what. I think the B13V or the B13 is fine. I am going to add the same sight just to make sure that everything is apples to apples, but as I said, you can choose anything else like a TAC 30 or something like that. And using this configuration, this gets us to 30.5 ergo and 138 vertical recoil. And this thing has an ADS speed of 15 actually, and you can improve it very slightly by adding something like the XRS DRG if you really wanted to, and you could put on something really cheap like the Knight's Armament vertical foregrip if you want to boost up the ergo a little bit extra. This also allows you to add some lights and stuff, but this build is very, very cheap. You could also change over the pistol grip to something more cost effective like the sword grip, where now you're getting into the 42s in ergonomics, which is going to be starting to be comparable with the other builds, which is like pretty interesting. It's also very light. Using the standard stock is an extremely light way to use the SVD, and with this particular method, you have a rifle that is honestly fine. Like the SVD is mostly about the bullets rather than about the build, but obviously if you want to make it perfect and want to have like 10 frames of ADS speed, you need to do the things we talked about for some of the other builds. But this is perfectly usable if you're not trying to fight somebody in CQB up close, because the SVD will just kill people. It'll take people out, especially if you can get access to some of the good ammo. So finally, as usual, let's check out a few clips of the SVD in action as I've been using it recently. Doesn't mean I'm not just going to get shot in the face, though. Another VPX, okay. Alright, we'll check this box here. Anything in the box? L1 stim? Not sure if I heard steps then, like in conjunction with my own. Oh, can't be that. I did. Mr. Pilgrim bag. Let's go back this way. Maybe he went inside? I wonder where he went. Can't really leave, right, without me seeing him. Now, do we rush the building? I think we kind of do at this point, maybe. But I reckon he's probably still inside. I'm gonna try not to get shot out of a window or something. That's boarded up. Blind him with your mighty flashlight. Well, that's kind of the plan. I'm just worried about him not being there and then looking at the door and then killing me. Right, let's do it. Let's go, friends. Don't think you can get in there, can you? Oh, you can. Didn't know you could get inside. You gone upstairs? I bet he's just evaded me and is not in here anymore. Oh no. Nice. So, because we came in from the other side, he actually got duked out. Let's just make sure there's not another teammate. He tried to pre-fire me because, probably similar to me, he didn't realize that you could come in through the back. I actually didn't know that you could get in through that door until literally just now. So he thought I was coming in through the main door, which is here or here. So he pre-fired this. I wasn't there, and then he pre-fired this. So he, like, a fair play, he tried his best, right? But I didn't realize you could get in here. Don't forget hillside if you take us back. Good point. Yeah, I didn't know you could get in through that door. So we had an accidental outstrat there. Okay. Ah, another SVD! He died there. Oh, that is interesting. So somebody did die there. They could have been shot across. It looks like a player as well. The unsuppressed M4 of suspicion. Where is this person? Oh, there's somebody over on the rock. Now I wish I had an LPVO. I'm not sure how far down this person is. Oh, there they are. Did they come out? Kind of feels like they didn't. Okay, we're gonna swing back round. I'm gonna go up this way. I am in range of my shooter, but we're gonna flank this. It looks like they're moving left, so I'm gonna go back this way. I'm gonna try and cut them off. I think that they're a pair. I suspect that they're a pair. I think there's a guy up on top of here. I think there's two of them. I think there's one guy on the cliff who's like covering for the dude going through the place. I might get caught doing this, but oh, oh, ow! Let's get out of the bush. Okay. We're alright. Now we just got to swing all the way through. Whoa. Oh, come on. I'm just going to go SJ6 because this flank's not going to work otherwise. Weren't you using any scope? I was intending on fighting people in chalets, but that didn't end up working out. Right, I'm going to CMS myself now. I might die here if they're kind of being smart and thinking about where I might be and stuff. But I don't know, we'll see. This bit's probably the pairiest section, because I just have to run. There's no cover. That's why spawning here sucks so much. I'm going to get to this ridgeline and then I'm going to stop running. Star up. Surprised you're not dead, running around so much. Well, it's quite late in the raid. It's like 18 minutes remaining. Dead scav over here. Where'd dude go? Now, as I suspected, I think they were in a pair, these guys. That was a lot of shots. That man ate bullets. I think he was with the M4 guy, personally. This guy and the unsuppressed M4 guy, like, surely weren't in cahoots. They must have been. Doesn't make sense otherwise. It must have been. I'm going to get beamed by an unsuppressed M4 when I lie down and loot this man. Yeah? No? Am I dead yet? Am I going to die? That's why. Cable arms steel plate. That's why he just took it, yeah. Then we could take the CQCM. There we go. Stream laggy? Why is the stream laggy? Shouldn't be. It's looking fine for me. Nothing. Oh. Well, that's interesting. Maybe I did kill one up there. Maybe I did kill him through the trees. I'll have to go back and like see when that was. Grenade got him. Could have been. So as always, big shout out to all my patrons. And as usual, have fun in your raids.